afternoon and welcome to Virtual Day Trip to Wine Country. I'm Sam Kimball from New York Wine Events. Happy Cinco de Mayo, everybody. We are going to celebrate with wine today. Looking forward. We are today heading north to the Finger Lakes in upstate New York, the beautiful Finger Lakes, which is a region that contains over 100 wineries and is a source of world-class, cool climate wines, particularly Riesling, but a number of others too, which we're gonna learn about. We are heading to Keuka Lake. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. One of the larger Finger Lakes, and we're visiting an iconic and famous winery called Dr. Konstantin Frank. Their founder, Dr. Konstantin Frank, is known as the father of Vinifera, or Vinifera, pronounced correctly. And I will have our guest today explain what exactly that means, but I'll give you a bit of a hint. Dr. Frank himself was instrumental in bringing traditional grapes from the European tradition to winemakers in the US and introducing that tradition here. In our virtual tasting series, this is our furthest trip north so far, so we're really excited. Dr. Frank makes amazing wine. Their approach to great winemaking is generational. The family is still very much running and building and growing the winery. And each Frank family member is involved in that process, from going back to the founding of the vineyard and the winery a number of years ago, back to the 60s. To learn all about Dr. Frank's winery, you can visit drfrankwines.com. We'll put that in the chat, drfrankwines.com. And also Dr. Frank's, I should say, is going to show us some great offers today on the wines they make. So listen up when we do the tasting. They ship to most states. So that's great to know, including New Jersey. Last but not least, as always, if you have questions during our session and tasting, please put them in the Q&A. We will answer them as we go or a little later on in the session. And I should mention that New York Wine Events has worked with Dr. Frank's for years. We love the winery. We love the people and the wines. We're fans of the vineyard and the wines. So today it's my great privilege and pleasure to host this session and invite our guest, the general manager and a founding family member of Dr. Frank's, Meaghan Frank. Welcome, Meaghan.
Thank you so much, Sam. I'm so happy to be here.
It's great having you here. So Meaghan, if I'm not mistaken, your great-grandfather is the founder of the winery. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. Dr. Konstantin Frank was my great-grandfather, and he has a very interesting story, actually. He came from Ukraine. He grew up in Odessa, Ukraine, and from a very early age, from the age actually of 6, he was just enamored with vines, and by the age of 12, he actually made his first wine. So pretty interesting. He really, felt almost that it was his calling, research and science. So
that's amazing. And so he came originally from the Ukraine to this country. If memory serves correctly, he was multilingual, but he didn't speak English.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to show you. Can I show you a photo?
Absolutely. Share your screen. Show everybody this.
I'll do that. Okay, here we go. Let's see. So here's some old photos of Konstantin. So Konstantin, I mentioned from an early age, just really was very interested in growing grapes and also making wine. So he attended the Polytechnic Institute of Odessa and earned his PhD. And his thesis was actually planting vinifera, which is the big umbrella term for the European species of grape, in cold climates. So perfectly setting him up for what he would do later in New York. But the photo you can see here, the larger photo, is actually a plow that Constantine helped build that would help hill up a foot of soil to protect the graft union, which is the most vulnerable
Ah,
portion of the vine there in Odessa. So he made a lot of important contributions in Eastern Europe, and then when he came here to New York as well.
that's amazing. So I have another follow-on question about Dr. Konstantin Frank, and that is he came to the U.S. in the 50s. I think founded the winery in early 60s. Is that right?
Yes, so he came through New York with his family. He was a World War II refugee with his wife and 3 children, and worked as a dishwasher in Manhattan. He didn't speak a word of English, as you mentioned, but spoke a few other languages. So a few years later, he went up to the Finger Lakes in search of a research position at the Geneva Experiment Station. And there he really was so perplexed why there was no vinifera. He couldn't find any Chardonnay, any Riesling, any Pinot Noir. And when he asked researchers why this was the case, they said it's too cold. And he thought that can't be true because in Odessa, he would say that in the winter it got so cold that your spit would freeze before it hit the ground. It was just so cold.
And he
So
was
he
growing the
knew that
grapes
wasn't the
there.
case. Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
he knew that wasn't the case. He had a theory that it was actually due to Phylloxera, which is a microscopic root louse that's found here. It's native to North America, and it devastated vineyards all across Europe, when Constantine was living there. So he had already dealt with this pest, and he felt that that was really the problem. And he went out to basically find a solution, which was grafting hardy American rootstock like a puzzle piece with Vitis vinifera, the European species. And that was successful.
That's
So
interesting.
yeah, so that's really the key to his success, and sometimes it takes an outsider, someone with nothing to lose, to change what was being done. So it's pretty
That's
interesting.
awesome. Let me jump back on the screen. I want to show a couple of images that
Sure.
I selected of the area
Hmm.
for people. Um, and my next question is, what made him choose the shores of Lake Keuka or Keuka
Hmm.
Lake for the winery and for growing grapes? I mean, he came to New York. He worked as a dishwasher in New York City, but he chose this particular spot. It turns out to have been a brilliant choice. But at
Yes.
the time, he was a pioneer and doing something that others had not done. And I'm curious what made him choose this particular location.
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically, the Finger Lakes is a collection of 11 very deep glacial lakes. And this was really reminiscent of some of the areas that he had seen in Europe. So, the deep glacial lakes help to moderate the area, the temperatures. So we get cooling breezes, in the growing season, and then warming breezes in the winter. And the winter cold is actually our biggest challenge here. So to have those warming breezes, because the lake really holds its temperature, is really important. He was also very intrigued because, as you can see behind me, there's kind of a rolling elevated slope, which helps with airflow, it helps with drainage, it also helps increase the sun exposure. So, varieties that are suited to a cool climate, like Riesling, Grüner Veltliner, Gewürztraminer, Pinot Noir, those are the grapes we were really specializing in because of our site here, and Constantine saw the potential for that. He was also really interested in the soils found here in the Finger Lakes, because during the last ice age, when glaciers receded, they carved out these deep glacial lakes, but they also left behind in their path a myriad of different soil types. So even within our property, we have many different soil types, and you find different pockets of different soils, throughout the band of the 11 lakes. So it makes growing grapes really interesting. And most of the vineyards here are dry farmed, so you have roots that are going really deep into the soil, picking up all these trace elements of the soil.
Interesting.
Predominantly shale out here on the west side of Cuca Lake, but there's lots of other interesting soil types. So I think that also very much interested him.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's also like, I think people have to realize, like, it's amazing that he would have this vision for the area and understand. I mean, this was before a lot of the technology we have today even existed in terms
Hmm.
of, weather measurements and instruments. And there were some, but in the late 50s, early 60s, it was primitive compared to what we have today. And for him to grasp and evaluate the area so well and so in such a visionary way is an extraordinary thing.
Mm.
So was there a particular philosophy and approach that he had when he started to making wine? Did he see a certain type of wine he wanted to make?
Hmm.
What was the philosophy?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sam. So Konstantin, as I mentioned, he devoted his life to research. So he was a scientist at heart. He was not a businessman. He basically went out on his own and started his own winery, purchased the land here in 1957, had his first vintage of wines in 1962. And really, the winery was run more like an experiment station. So he had over 66 different varieties planted, and he had these intricate journals that he would document every single vine because he was testing not only different grape varieties, but different clones, different rootstocks in different soil types, and he was vinifying everything separately to test the quality. So, as you can imagine, this is a very difficult business model for a startup winery. So his main goal was really that he wanted to see vinifera flourish in America. He wanted a quality revolution in American winemaking. So the business portion really took off with my grandfather Willie, who cut the 66 different varieties down to about 20, a little bit more manageable, and basically went out in search of distributors and kind of you know worked really hard and traveled a lot and got our wines out there and in the hands of some consumers, so, and also told the story. So that was really that transformation. But in terms of Constantine, he really, I think, especially loved Riesling. Riesling was, you know, the primary focus for him since the beginning. And he actually made the first Trockenbeerenauslese style botrytis Riesling in America in his first vintage. So that's kind of incredible in 1962. And the wine in the 60s was valued at $40 a bottle. And not only
Huh.
did you pay the $40, but you also had to prove that you had been married at least 20 years, because then you would know the sacrifice of making this style of wine. So he put a lot of obstacles on purchasing.
I mean, a
Um,
$40 bottle of wine in the 60s, probably
it's a lot of money.
inflation adjusted, that's got to be a $200 bottle or a $300 bottle now.
Yep.
I should also point out, and I hope you don't mind my mentioning this, but
Sure.
we've worked with you guys for so many years, and we know
Yeah.
the winery, we know your family and
Hmm.
the wines. The thing that always impresses me is, and I don't know how many times this happened, if it was once or twice or a
Hmm.
few times, but it's important that I want to tell our audience today that Dr. Frank's wines have been served for state dinners in the White House.
Hmm.
I mean, that
Hmm.
you got 500 wineries in New York State. I don't know, 10,000 or something in California and
Hmm.
750 in Oregon and wherever. And that's, when a head of state, when the German chancellor comes, they're like, well, let's pull out the good stuff. Let's get the Dr. Frank selections in for the state dinner. And if anybody watching has not had these wines, if you go to a tasting, one of our events, or if you go to the tasting room with Dr. Frank's, you can taste through the whole portfolio of wines, and one is better than the next. They're that good. And so I think it's important, for me at least, I like to call that out because I've been so impressed year after year, the level of quality and the variety of wines from sparkling. And you do the Riesling's great. I mean, Riesling is essentially it's the official grape of New York State. I mean, that is the grape that grows well in this climate. And at the same time, you have all these other selections and varietals as well. So I'm just a huge fan, and I had to make that shameless plug because
Well,
it's
thank you, Sam.
easier for me to do than you, Megan.
Sure.
Question: you grow all the grapes, right? And you grow a lot of grape varietals. You grow. Are you still doing 20?
Actually, we're just around 17 right now.
17, but that's still a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
people need to know for any winery, whether it's a big California winery or a French winery, 17 is a large number of varietals, very challenging. Is there, all of the wines are made from the grapes grown on the property. So you are an estate winery, correct?
Yes. So we have two labels. So we have our, Dr. Konstantin Frank label here, which I'm sorry.
There we go. Yep.
And then we also have Salmon Run, which is our second line of wines.
Yeah, talk about that because I'm not familiar with Salmon Run. I know the Dr. Frank stuff well.
Sure. Yeah, so Salmon Run was a line of wines developed by my father, Fred, in 1993. So basically, Salmon Run is kind of a more value-focused approach. So we're partnering with local growers throughout the Finger Lakes. Many of them we've had contracts and handshake deals for generations. And it kind of allows us to pass that savings on to our consumers. So for us, we have some of the oldest vines in America. These old vine vineyards, they're not producing very high yields. They're, as the vine ages, it produces less fruit, but the fruit is more concentrated. So it's just not economical for us, for the second tier of wines to utilize our vineyards for that. But it's a give and take. So sometimes if we have a younger block, maybe that would go into the Salmon Run. But just really excellent, fresh, fruit forward styles of wine. The Salmon Run Riesling is probably our most popular. We also do a Salmon Run Chardonnay Riesling. We do a Salmon Run Chardonnay, which is unoaked. So multitude of different wines. And Salmon Run, the name comes from the lake behind me. My dad loves to fish, and there are these enormous landlocked salmon that you can catch, and
Really?
Yes, they're like very difficult to catch because
so you can have salmon in a landlocked lake. They never go to the ocean and come back up.
Nope. Yeah, at one point the lakes were connected somehow, and that's how they got in. And then when the lakes separated, that's how they're trapped. So Salmon Run is kind of a name that comes from his love of fishing and also kind of an homage to the land here.
Yeah.
So that makes up about half of our production, and we are working with growers for those wines.
Right. That's not the estate selections, but all the Dr. Frank selections are estate. Yeah.
Right.
That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you know what? I think we want to get to tasting momentarily. Can we do a quick tour? Do you want to do the 360
Sure.
images and if the connection is good, even take a step outside? And
yeah, absolutely.
The day is still nice. The weather's still good.
Yes. Yeah. Let me pull that up here.
While you do that, how many? I'll give you an easy question. How many cases of wine does Dr. Frank's produce every year?
Yeah, so we basically we do fluctuate a little bit. I'm sorry, I was reading some.
No worries.
We do fluctuate a little bit because we're 100% vinifera. But in a normal year, we would be producing about 25 to 30,000 cases of the Dr. Konstantin Frank line of wines, and then an additional 20 to 25,000 cases of Salmon Run.
Wow.
So that's sort of our breakdown. Yeah, and
So now
you
what are
know,
we looking at here?
yes, so we have our sparkling wine cellar here. So this is just next door. This was really the legacy of my grandfather Willie. So he dreamt of producing traditional method sparkling wines. Um, and my aunt Barbara is also very involved in this production of sparkling. You can see the gyro pellets back here, but it's we're underground here, so the deep stone, cellars, it's a pretty even temperature all year round, so important for the aging process of sparkling. Sorry, I'm moving around a lot, but you can see these bottles back here, they're all hand stacked, which is pretty interesting to just to save space. And if we turn the bottle on its side, you would see sediment, and that's the
Right.
secondary fermentation has completed, and our vintage sparklings age between 4 to 6 years on this wall. And this wall has 6 rows double stacked of bottles, so there's tons of wine down there. It's really a good place to wait out the pandemic, I think.
Now, for our audience, explain what happens with this. So you have the bottles that are aging in stacks on the wall, but explain, if you would, go back to the racks
Yes.
in the middle. Explain what that's all about, because
Sure.
there's a process where the bottles have to be turned on a daily or even more than daily basis.
Yes. Yeah. So
And
basically,
again, this is all sparkling.
this is sparkling. Yeah. So basically, once the secondary fermentation is finished, we do the aging on the lees process, which you see on the wall, for a number of years. And then we have to get the sediment out of the bottle. So the way that we start that process is riddling, which is the A-frame racks that you see there. And a very influential woman in Champagne, Madame Clouquot, was the one to actually
Ah.
invent this process.
As
And
in Veuve Clicquot?
as in Veuve Clicquot, exactly, the widow Clicquot. So she was so frustrated because back then in Champagne, they would just decant. They would open the bottle and it would be, hazy from the sediment of the secondary fermentation. After the yeast are finished doing their job, they fall out of solution. She was so frustrated, she was losing half the bottle every time she opened a bottle of sparkling. So she cut holes in her kitchen table, put the bottles upside down, and basically was the first to kind of invent this process, which we still use today. And that was in the mid 1800s. So this technique has really lasted the test of time. But yeah, the bottles have to be basically quarter turned and pushed in twice a day for about 2 weeks, and we can slowly, like a pendulum, the sediment will reach the neck of the bottle, and then it can be frozen, and then in a process that we call disgorgement, we remove the crown cap. The yeast bug shoots out because of all the pressure. We top with a little reserve wine, and then cork it and wire hood for safety, and then it's
Wow.
ready to go.
So for all of those of you who like sparkling wine and champagne, would you ever have guessed that this is what has to happen during the fermentation and secondary fermentation process to get the sediment so you can have a nice clear glass of sparkling wine or champagne? That's amazing. And I didn't know until right now, I wasn't really clear that the disgorgement process, the top comes off and out comes the sediment, and then you top it off with reserve wine and then recork it.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
You got it, Sam.
So
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
it's labor intensive. That's
Yes.
amazing. That's so cool. All right, should we take a look around at a couple of other spots?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So I'll show you a few of the vineyard sites here because we do have some wines to taste. So here is one of our Riesling vineyards, and I talked about, this is Cuca Lake here. So if you can see those huge chunks of shale,
Wow.
just really incredible. And you don't see any irrigation lines here. I think I mentioned we're all dry farmed, so there's no need to irrigate. We get a lot of rainfall throughout the growing season. But just very rocky, acidic soils, so perfect for producing Riesling. We're also going to try Rkatsiteli, which you can see here. So really interesting grape variety, Georgian grape, Rkatsiteli, the oldest grape in the world. Super interesting. We've had it here since the 50s. And then I'll show you, let's see. We do some great special events, food and wine pairings at the winery, which we're hoping to open late summer with some of these experiences. So that's kind of nice.
And this area was your baby, right? You were the prime mover on developing this part of the facility. Is that right?
I mean, everyone gives me way too much credit. It was 100% a team effort. We all kind of came together. But yeah, I mean, I think the Finger Lakes as a region, we're just moving towards, more experiential uh, focus visits. And that's something I really did see a lot of in Australia. And I think that's the right direction to go to. So we do some cheese flights out here, which is beautiful.
I
So,
look
I mean, our view is just like,
great.
it's gorgeous. Um, this
I,
is during the summer.
I'm coming up as soon as the distancing gets a
Yes,
little
please,
bit
Sam. We'd
less
love to have
freezing.
you.
I'm so overdue. Your aunt is going to kill me. I've actually sent people and I still haven't gone.
I love it. That's so funny. That's
Look at
great.
the lake is amazing. The lake is glacial and it's about 200 feet deep.
That's right.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
cool. All right, should we taste some wines?
Yeah, let's do it. All right.
I think only just to try to get me to pronounce Rkatsiteli.
Yes, exactly. I love it. Yeah, so the first one we have is the Brut here. So 2016. Hopefully everyone can see that. Ooh,
Yeah, if you
if I just stay still.
if you stop sharing your screen and then
Oh, okay.
yeah, you're good.
Here we go.
We do have an interim question, which I would love to see if we can answer. Hold on. Um, Give me 1 second. Where is that? And then we'll dive into the first wine.
Sure.
When do you tentatively think you'll be open for physical tastings?
That's a great question.
That is the $1 million question.
Right now, it's looking to be May 15th is, the day that at least this region is going to be starting to open up. So we have a few plans in place where we're probably going to be a reservation only model for a few months. But we're working towards that, and we're gonna, have a lot of outside private tastings to be in the fresh air. So I would say, assuming, we don't have a resurgence and kind of a second wave, that, you know, mid-May, we should be open reservation only. Is kind of what we're thinking.
Cool.
But thank you for the question.
Yep.
Great. Yeah, so we have the Brut here. So 2016 Brut.
Yep. That's your sparkling flagship. Yeah.
It is, yeah. So um, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and also Chardonnay. Oh, yes, I have that too. Yeah, so this is probably our most classic. Um, Basically, actually, it was the first sparkling my grandfather made in 1985. So it's mostly Chardonnay. Here we go. Move my shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah. That looks good.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we also list the disgorgement date on the back here. We list, oh, sorry about that,
That's so interesting, huh?
the month and the year. So then you can know when that process of removing the crown cap and, the reserve wine being filled. And this one was disgorged July 2019. So we do constant disgorgement throughout the year, and we have a devoted sparkling winemaker who's been with us now 15 years. His name's Eric Bauman, and he's basically disgorging wine pretty much every month. So it's important to share that information with consumers.
And now, what occasion or what food will this sparkling brut go with, Meaghan?
Yes, I think sparkling wine is, really shouldn't just be reserved for special occasions. Especially in this price point, this is going to retail right around $25 a bottle. And we're talking 4 years aging on the lees. Like that is so far and above the what champagne demands for their vintage sparkling program. So we're really taking it to the next level. These are excellent value wines. So I think they should be consumed on kind of a regular basis, and especially when you don't know what to pair with a dish. Sparkling is really, especially traditional method, drier sparkling is going to be, just the ticket to pair with just about anything, from, oysters to seafood, all the way through to potato chips and popcorn. It's it's really whatever you want.
I mean, I think there's a variety of some of the takeout and pickup foods that we're all ordering on
Hmm.
quarantine that a sparkling goes with as well.
Exactly.
How, by comparison, a bottle of Veuve Clicquot, how long has
Hmm.
that been on the lees versus this is 4 years?
Mm.
If you're a mass market but a famous French champagne,
Hmm.
is that less time in the cellar?
Sure, yeah. I was actually really lucky to go to Champagne a few years ago, and we visited Veuve Clicquot, and it was an incredible visit. And something that the champagne producers do that a lot of New World producers like ourselves don't do as much is they hold back a lot of reserve wine. So they're not, making that much vintage sparkling wine from
Mhm.
one single year. They're, adding it to a blend of sometimes 20, 30 years. They're holding back wine and then blending it for consistency.
Interesting.
So it's a completely different model. They're just very well set up, to do that sort of winemaking. And it was really impressive for me. Every house has their own kind of secret as to how um, much, especially for the new non-vintage sparklings, how much reserve wine they're adding, and then they'll only do a vintage if it's like an exceptional year, and that's regulated actually by the government. So for us, we aren't regulated by any rules if we can produce wine from one single year or a multi-vintage. So it's just more common to have them from one single year. But yeah, I would say that's a huge difference. Um, but we are, we're working with the same classic three champagne varieties. We're utilizing the same traditional method, so
Yeah,
there are quite a few similarities as well.
awesome. So should we move along
Yes, we
to
will.
the dry Riesling?
Sounds great. Yeah, so this is a really special wine for me. This one is named after my great grandmother, Eugenia. And
That would be the wife of Constantine.
correct, Sam. Yes, that is the wife of Constantine.
I'm good like that.
You're
Just
good. Yeah, I never actually met Constantine. He passed away before I was born. But Eugenia I knew because she passed away when she was, I think, 97. So
wow.
she way outlived Constantine. And we would come and visit the winery where I'm sitting, where our tasting room is just next door to their old house. And for me, the winery was all about her, and she never got any credit for the sacrifices and all the work that she put in. So we actually devoted a block. I'm looking over because it's just out the window of our oldest Riesling planting going back to 1968. And it's just a 1 acre block, and that makes up the Eugenia dry
Wow.
Riesling.
So it's small production,
Very
not
small
high paced
production.
production. Yeah. Interesting. Now,
Yes.
how is this Riesling? You've had a number of, sort of iconic, years and years of great Rieslings, dry, semi-dry. How is this one a continuation of that trend, or was there something specific that's really different about this one?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, I mean, the block, because it's such an old block of Riesling, you get a really nice concentration. It's also a, a block in the vineyard that has one of the highest contents of shale that we have on the property. So you get a really intense mineral focus, from the resulting wine. And yeah, I'd say this one we try to vinify different blocks on the property separately just to keep track of, the different blocks that we have, because we have so many different clones planted on different areas, and we're on two different lakes with our vineyards. And every year this block was consistently the best one, and we thought, why we have to do something special with this
So
and pay tribute.
this is effectively your premier dry Riesling.
Yeah, you could say that. We do have a second one that's for the east side of Seneca, another single vineyard Riesling that's named for my grandmother, Margaret. So it's really interesting to taste them together, because Margaret is, from the east side of Seneca, where it's a much warmer area. The lake is over 600 feet deep, so it's incredibly, warm. It's called the banana belt of the Finger Lakes over there, which is very
Wow.
funny because there's no bananas, but it's pretty warm. So
Um,
it's interesting to taste them side by side.
and just for viewers who don't know, a block is a section of the vineyard where a certain area of where the grapes are growing. It's, it could be a quarter acre, it could be half an acre, but it's a certain area where those grapes are growing, correct?
Yes, thank you, Sam. And we have a lot of strange words.
It's okay. It wasn't, you didn't really get that technical, but I just wanted
Hmm.
to clarify.
Yeah, thank you.
And so, okay, so here we're in New York State. Riesling is the classic wine, the classic white wine. This is what, New York State and the Finger Lakes win awards internationally for these wines.
Hmm.
Here's your premier dry Riesling. What do we pair it with?
That's a good question. Okay, let's see. So it's Cinco de Mayo. My husband's actually from Mexico. So and it's funny, they actually don't celebrate Cinco de Mayo. It's like not a big deal at all there, which is very funny to me. But I think tonight we're actually going to be having fish tacos. So
Wow.
this would be perfect with fish tacos. Just something with a lot of freshness. We also, my grandmother's from Germany, so we have a lot of recipes with spätzle, and especially with pork. It's very good. Riesling's like a classic, pairing with that. It's just unlimited, the options. Riesling's probably the most versatile wine to pair food with. There's just so much you can do. And I know I said that about sparkling, but there's
Well, I
just
think that
a lot of options.
these first two selections are particularly versatile. With the Riesling, what's the price point on the Riesling for people?
Yeah, so this one comes in right around $30 a bottle.
Got it. And by the way, stay tuned, everybody, because we're going to hear about some of the discounts and incentives that come if you buy, more than a couple bottles. There's some really good ones. All right, should we
Sure.
move on to
Yeah, yeah.
the Rkatsiteli? Am I saying it?
Yes, you are saying it
Oh
perfectly,
my God.
Sam.
I practiced.
Excellent.
I practiced like for 2 hours this afternoon trying to say Rkatsiteli.
That's
So,
great.
so I just want to give, I always give this plug. And so if you've watched our day trips to wine country virtually before, or you've been on any of our tours, forgive me. So we're boring. We're Americans. We like to drink Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and Cabernet Sauvignon, and that's about it. So this wine, the Rkatsiteli,
Mm-hmm.
Rkatsiteli is a type of grape. Okay,
That's
people,
right.
let's not be boring. Let's try new grapes. I'm always challenging our audience to find their new favorite grape varietal for wine, and I think we just found, at least we found today's new favorite, which is Rkatsiteli. What's it all about?
Oh yeah. Um, Rkatsiteli, yes. So you can shorten the name Rkats. That's a lot easier to say. Just Rkats, and you're kind of in the club. You're in
Yep,
the
Rkat.
the cool
Is
circle.
it that like the wine vernacular?
Yes, yeah, that's it. So yeah, Rkatsiteli, I think I mentioned before, is currently the oldest wine grape to date. It dates back to 3000 BC in Georgia,
Oh my God.
and incredible history. So Konstantin, because he was Ukrainian, he had planted a large block of Rkatsiteli on the estate that he was managing in Odessa. So when it came time to plant, different varieties in New York, Rkatsiteli was one of the first on his mind because it's a cool climate, grape variety. It is intensely aromatic. Um, it's, cold hardy. So all of the attributes that work so well here in the Finger Lakes. And yeah, it's really got incredible history in Georgia, and we're the leading producer of it here in the U.S. and it's still pretty unknown, as you as you said. But tasting this wine, it's just very herbal, very floral, very, as I mentioned, intensely aromatic. So thinking of cuisine, Indian, Cajun, Thai, anything with spice, it's going to work so well with. And this is a dry style. With something a little spicier, maybe you do want a wine with a little bit more sweetness, but this Rkatsiteli, anything with like exotic spice, it's going to pair so beautifully with. And I agree, it's one to definitely step out of your comfort zone. If you have wine friends that are really, into blind tastings, if you take this to a blind tasting, I promise you no one will get it unless, they're very into Georgian wines.
Right.
So that is a good one to stump
Yeah,
your
that's
wine friends.
great. Well, that it's going to be the first one I taste when I come up to the tasting room.
Sounds good, Sam.
Um,
We'll save you some.
all right, well, yeah, definitely do. What is that one limited production as well?
Not so much. We have about 10 acres planted, so we have a
Well,
pretty good, sizable amount. This is a stainless steel fermented and matured style, but we also do an orange wine with our Catzatelli, which is very traditional.
yeah.
And that one is very limited production. So that one we only make about 150 cases of. So that's definitely one that we'll have you try when you
All right,
come up.
excellent, excellent. All right, so we're going to move on to the unofficial red wine grape of the state of New York, Cabernet Franc.
Yes, Cabernet Franc. So we've got it right here. From 2016, fantastic vintage in the Finger Lakes. It was actually a
Awesome.
drought year, so we don't get many of those. Very hot, dry growing season. But as you mentioned, Sam, it is a very popular grape variety for the Finger Lakes, but also for other parts of New York. And that's because it ripens a few weeks, typically a week and a half to 2 weeks earlier than Cabernet Sauvignon. So that makes it a perfect variety for cool climates or climates with, variability. Um, it's much more sort of aromatic style, much more, similar to the Loire, I would say, in, the styles that you're seeing here in the Finger Lakes. And, these wines have great acidity. They have moderate tannins, not too much. They have moderate alcohol, so they're going to pair with a variety of foods as well. And you can have a few glasses and not feel like, you know, you're having a 15% very
Yeah.
heavy full-bodied wine. These are wines that are meant to go with food, that are meant to be enjoyed. So yeah, so that's Cab
So
Franc.
it's a little lighter. Um,
Yes.
so if you would complete this sentence, if you like blank,
Hmm.
you'll love this Cabernet Franc. So
Okay.
what if somebody and blank needs to
Hmm.
be a wine that everyone knows. It could be a Californian, it could be a French or an Italian.
Okay, let me think.
What's the analog for if for somebody who doesn't know Cabernet Franc? What's the
Hmm.
analog of a more mainstream wine?
I mean, for us, our probably our biggest parallel would be like a place like Chinon. I know it's not, it's kind of an obscure area
Yeah.
of the Loire, but that they're doing Cabernet Franc there that's in a very similar style to ours. Let me think about,
So a light French
yeah,
red wine.
Austrian Blaufränkisch, which we also
Oh,
do, but
interesting.
something
Yeah.
in that, or a German, well, maybe a German. I don't want to say Spätburgunder. That's Pinot Noir, and that would be probably too light. But something from a cooler climate. I would say not much is going to compare, from the West Coast, unless the style is, you know, very restrained, just because, they're quite different
Yeah.
in body. But these wines are going to age beautifully, and they're gonna pair really nicely. So I would say, French Loire Valley, wines would
Lighter
be probably
French
the
wine,
closest.
not Southern Rhone. Um,
No.
we have Kathy has a question. What's the oak aging of the Cab Franc?
Yes, great question. So we're not working with a lot of new oak in any of the reds. Typically, up to 20% new would be kind of the standard, and that's the case for this wine here. So we build up our cellar to have, second fill, third fill, fourth fill barrels, in addition to buying a few new barrels every year. And so we work with a broker that has contacts in California, say like Opus One.
Hmm.
They only use the barrels once. So what do they do with those barrels? They can sell them to people like us here in the Finger Lakes, where we're not looking for too much oak.
Yeah,
So it spends 18 months in oak, and
it's
it's
French
all
oak.
French oak. Yep,
Yeah.
all French oak. We experimented in the past with some Hungarian and American, but the French oak, I think, does the best service, to the styles that we're producing.
That's great. And what is this one retail for?
This one retails for 22.
22. See, that's a value.
It is
And
certainly.
it's I've
Hmm.
had it. This is a great wine. I mean, it is consistently excellent.
Thank you.
I will have this with anything. I could have it with Chinese food. I could have it with spaghetti bolognese. It doesn't matter. It's a great even it can stand in for those bigger red wines because it's so drinkable and as you said, you can have a glass or two and not feel overwhelmed. I mean, nothing wrong with those
Right.
reds, but the
Of
bigger red
course, I love those too.
they're a
Hmm.
little more challenging. All right, excellent. So can we talk about where do we get these wines?
Sure. Yeah, so we're available in a multitude of states. Should be in your local stores. So we're distributed in 37 states. We ship to most states in the US as well. So you can purchase our wines directly if you can't find them from your local retailer.
I,
But
I think that's a great way to go. We have it on screen right here, drfrankwines.com.
yes, yeah. So we do have a full retail shop, and we've been shipping out a ton of wine during this pandemic, keep everybody, going in this tough time. But we are running a special for the foreseeable future for free shipping on 6 bottles or more. So it can be a really great value, even for people here in New York, because shipping for alcohol is just outrageous. And then we do have a variety of quantity discounts that we can see on the screen as well. So yeah, we appreciate the support, and yeah, we're very happy that it seems that people are consuming quite a bit of wine, during this tough time. So we hope that helps a little bit.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
I think we have another question. We're almost about to wrap. Elizabeth asks, why is Riesling called the grape of New York?
Great question. Yeah, so it's just Riesling is very well suited, especially to the Finger Lakes, because of our climate here. And Sam and I were talking a little earlier, Riesling, it's not, you're not able to plant and make excellent Riesling everywhere. And that's something that, for us, that's our strength. In a warmer climate, you just can't produce the same quality Riesling because you need, very acidic soils, you need rocky soils, and you also need a cool climate, which is not always available. So there are, of course, West Coast producers. I know a producer in Napa that does an amazing Riesling, but it's just not that common. It's much harder variety to grow. So Riesling is perfect, for our climate here because of the lakes, because of the soil, and because of the cool climate.
Yeah, no, that's true. And in fact, on Long Island, where obviously it's not that far away in the same state, it's harder for them their Rieslings generally don't compare to the Finger Lakes just because they don't have the cool climate. And I see you answered Frank's question in the chat. Yes, Dr. Frank's ships to New Jersey. That is, Meaghan, that's a common question in these sessions.
Sure.
We have a lot of wonderful audience members and people come to our events who are based in Jersey. And that's
great.
always a good question. Well, I want to thank you so much for doing this. It's been so great. I have real passion for your brand, your winery, your family. I can't recommend all of the above enough. Thank you for being a part of this, Meaghan.
Oh, thank you. It means so much. I really appreciate it. And
we'll do another one soon. And why don't we get into some food pairing, and
Yes, that sounds good.
Now that we've given the history, let's dive into the food and wine pairing.
Oh, I would love that. That sounds great.
And thanks everybody for watching. By the way, as always, you can see these broadcasts on demand, video on demand on our website, NewYorkWineEvents.com. Go to the virtual tastings tab, and we will see you at the next one. This week, actually, we have a few great sessions planned. Tomorrow, we're doing the Lens Winery from Long Island. Thursday, we are doing the Robert Bialy Vineyard from California. Iconic. They're iconic the way Dr. Frank is in New York. They're iconic in California. They've got a wonderful black chicken wine that's really cool. And then Friday, we're also going back to Napa to Goldschmidt. Actually, I misspoke, Sonoma. Anyway, Meaghan, thank you again. We will get you back on and we'll do some food pairing.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Bye. Take care.